Welcome to episode 27 of Maritime SoftwareHub, the People Podcast. My name's Callum Beaumont, the host of the show. Today I'm joined by John Wills, who's the VP of Product at a company called ShipNet. And we're going to be discussing the opportunities for transparency in shipping, and in particular in the commercial maritime space. So let's dive into it. Thanks a lot for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the show. Hi, John. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Thank you for having me. Very kind of you.
You're very welcome. And yeah, really excited to have you on the show today. And obviously, we're going to talk about the very interesting topic, which I know you're passionate about, is kind of transparency in shipping. So yeah, really excited to hear your insights in that area.
Thank you very much.
Why don't we dive in? Perhaps if you can give us a quick overview of your background and obviously your role now at ShipNet.
Okay, I'm a relative newcomer to shipping. So I've been in the industry for about 8-9 years now, maybe coming up to my 10th, which is a bit scary. My first proper job was like turning around telecoms companies and things like that in the dot-com crash. I'm kind of that age. But from there, I sort of went on to helping all kinds of organisations become more efficient. And some of these were people like the NHS. Some of these were, housing associations. Some of them were other private companies that were relatively small. If you want to sort of track a thread through the whole thing, like from the very start, it was always about helping people improve whatever it is they are doing by using data that they're probably generating just doing their day-to-day stuff. As I hit 40, I decided that I'd kind of done all I could in other sectors where I was working, and I just really fancied a big change, an entirely new field. I got a job selling vessel performance management software, and I did that for a few years, and then I came to ShipNet, where I've ended up responsible for their products. So that's the start and the end of it so far.
Yeah. Fantastic. And now, obviously, your role at ShipNet currently, can you give a quick overview of what your day-to-day looks like and the type of projects that you look after?
Oh, gosh. Well, I'm VP of Product, so I kind of look after the entire portfolio, and I'm responsible for all of the revenue, all the recurring revenue that comes from that. I've got about 130 customers worldwide, from the very, very big, so people like MOL, people like Wilson, down to people who are much smaller. I probably spend about a third of my week on sort of like internal projects, like getting the next wave of products ready, working with my product owners and product directors on that. I probably spend about a third of my week directly with customers, which is the really interesting part of the job, because I've spent so long at the coalface myself in various other industries, spending time with these guys who run massive ships everywhere, driving global trade is super, super interesting. And I probably have about a third of general business management in there as well. So a really, really, really varied week, and it's probably why I'm still at ShipNet after 5 years, because I get bored very, very quickly.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, it's really interesting that you've got such a diverse position. In general, do you see it being really important that product managers are engaging and speaking to their customers regularly?
100% essential. 100% essential. The job for all of us is to solve our customers' problems. Now, we happen to do it by building a product that we hope applies to every single one of our customers. But the fatal disease in product management is people who think they're right, and they need to impose their correctness upon the people who are paying for the products. Now, there's always a little bit of a discussion about how far do you lead your customers? Do you sort of force them to get involved with AI and ML, even though maybe they don't really know what it is? Or do you just sort of cravenly respond to everything they ask you for and hope that somehow your business will grow? The truth is, you're kind of in the middle between those two things. But anybody who doesn't spend at least a third of their life listening very carefully to what their customers are telling them is probably going to be one of the startups that doesn't make it past the year or 18-month period, which I think is about 78% of them or something last count. So no, listen carefully, because nobody has the right answer except the person who's paying the bill.
Yeah, very, very true. Same in our world as well.
Yeah. I look forward to
and yeah.
Sorry, go on.
Oh no, I was just going to say, yeah, and obviously ShipNet. If you could give a bit of a guidance on your kind of core ways that you help your customers with your digital journey, that would be fantastic.
So, I mean, our products do they cover all the bases. If you're an owner operator of a business or a third party ship manager, you can essentially pick up the phone and say, look, I need a one of everything to help me run my business. So we do everything from the revenue generation at the front end with a commercial management system, or a VMS, quite often called, and then at the other end we've got the asset management piece, where we keep your vessels compliant through safety. The PMS maintained so they're the right side of the water, i.e. above it, not below it, and then also the procurement part, which enables you to get the bits that you need to keep everything running. We also have a financial management piece, which is actually ShipNet's first product. So we've been doing that middle bit for 30 years, and that glues the front and the back end together. So as a result of covering all of this stuff, we've kind of got the core data for all of our customers' operations there, and it's just ready to be interrogated and understood. And that's really the first step on a digital transformation journey for anybody in any industry. It's what have I got? What does it tell me? And what can I do as a result of it? And for years and years and years in shipping, people have been talking, they've been using the Kelvin quote about, in order to improve, first you must measure. The benefit for ShipNet and its customers is that actually pretty much everything you need to measure is probably in the box already. So the sort of second step on the digital transformation journey is just getting the tools in order to interrogate that data and identify where you can start, and they're freeing up balance sheet capacity by managing your spares down to the level you actually need, and not just the gut call of the fleet managers say. So that's that sort of leveraging existing data is the first bit. We quite often also get involved with integrating solutions better. So a lot of customers come to us and say, look, we really like your PMS. We've got some issues with our sort of legacy procurement system. Can we bring your procurement system in so we've got a free flow of data between the two different components, so we can really start to get a holistic view of how we are maintaining our vessels? And then sometimes it's actually about helping customers develop more data in their operations. So doing a complete revamp, say, of their noon and port reporting activities. So they're getting better data shoreside, so they've got better visibility about what's going on the vessels. And that's the start. There's some other things going on in the industry.
Okay. So who are your... sorry, I apologise. A little bit of a lack, I think, maybe on my side. But...
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. Now, I was going to ask, who are your kind of main points of contacts typically within your clients? Are they kind of procurement, IT, or more on the technical side? Who are you mainly speaking to?
Mainly it's C-level for us. Yeah, because we do sort of one of everything.
Okay.
All the reporting lines end up with your technical director, your commercial director, your CFO, and your CEO. So it's much less talking to technical superintendents, which was kind of my domain when I was doing vessel performance stuff. And now it's much more right at the top table, which is great, because we can do we can have the big conversations that are about strategic gains and business outcomes, as opposed to just little functionality nips and tucks, and I just need a better report. We can talk to people about things that will really, really, really move the needle for our customers. Which, when you look at the level of investment that most IT projects require, is exactly the right kind of conversation to be having.
Yeah, no, I think that makes perfect sense. Okay, so shall we jump into the main kind of topic of the discussion today? Mm-hmm. And that's obviously transparency, in particular in the commercial shipping world. So when we talk about transparency with data and in shipping, can you give us an idea of really what we're referring to, certainly in your eyes?
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of two levels to it. So the first one is transparency within your own operations. And this is literally about, let's get all of the data we can. Let's make sure it's decent quality. Let's groom it. Let's get it in one place, and let's use it to really understand how we're performing. And I mean, one of the great things about the shipping industry is all the numbers are really big. The ships are huge. They cost a vast amount. They move a huge amount of stuff all around the world for everybody. The revenues are big. The costs are big. So if you've got good enough data, you can make relatively small improvements that have a big real world impact. If you reduce your fuel consumption by 5%, that's $1 million plus operation for even a relatively small shipping company. Likewise, if you can reduce your stock of spare parts by 20% or something, you end up with sufficient capacity on your balance sheet to go out and buy new ships. So there's real opportunities by just doing things that in smaller non-maritime businesses would be the equivalent of saving you a couple of quid on a ream of photocopier paper. For shipping, you can do real big things with them. So that's the first sort of level, getting everybody inside the company access to the data and the tools to better understand what the status quo is and to find out how they can improve. The sort of second tier of transparency is making that data more available to everybody in the market, and that's the bit that shipping is lagging, quite far behind other industries with, because everybody else, I think, is kind of comfortable with a lot of data being in the public space and the opportunities that data being in the public space, the opportunities that brings, being a benefit to pretty much everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you touched upon other industries. Are there any examples you can share where, I don't know, the automotive or wherever it may be, where they're doing it particularly well that maybe we can learn from in shipping?
Crikey. There's loads. I mean, the sort of classic transparency from other industries is actually eBay. So when you think about it, all eBay really did was make the contents of our attics and our cupboards sort of like much more visible to everybody else across the world. And and it gave you a mechanism to monetize that, basically. So if I discover an old guitar or something up in my loft and I put that on eBay and you buy it, I benefit because I've got £200 or something, and I've got rid of the guitar that was taking up space next to my cold water tank. You're pleased because you've just bought a guitar that presumably you wanted more than the 200 quid. But also there's a sort of societal benefit as well, because that guitar didn't end up in landfill. I have 2 kids, so like my principal environmental drain on the world is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cubic meters of plastic tat that eBay has helped me successfully get rid of without it going to recycling or landfill. So eBay's like a really classic example of how a bit of transparency can bring mutual benefit and a wider indirect societal benefit. But there isn't really an industry that hasn't benefited from the elimination of that sort of information asymmetry. And shipping is, as I say, quite a long way behind on this one. So so information asymmetry is when one party in a trade has more information than the other, and it tends to disproportionately benefit the person that holds the most information, which is great for that person, but terrible for the other people in firstly that deal, but also the industry more generally. So if we can use transparency and the availability of open data to eliminate some of that information asymmetry, you're going to end up with more efficient markets, lower costs and prices, because information asymmetry tends to mean that people end up paying a fairer price for whatever they're buying. Reduce market failure is another one. Improved decision making, better trust and cooperation. And then there's a whole bunch of sort of like second tier benefits, because obviously the more data you have in a place that's used by people, the more data is generated by that, because there's more trade going on. And it's a virtuous circle where things improve. You can look at virtually any other industry in the world, and that they have all, I think pretty much without exception, taken advantage of the information asymmetry reduction that things like the internet has brought. So with shipping, it's not happened yet. And when it does, the net effects will be revolutionary in so many ways, in so many different levels.
I guess, I mean, you touched on it a little bit there. So in what way can better transparency kind of benefit either ship owners, charterers, or anybody kind of involved within the commercial space, what are the main benefits, would you say, of better transparency?
Well, price discovery for a start. So at the moment, one of the things that struck me when I came into shipping is that and if you look at Fernley's newsletter, actually every week there's an awful lot of, we think that the market is doing this, we think that the market is doing the other, and it's quite simply, there's no effective method of price discovery in shipping. Nobody really knows the value of a trade. Nobody really knows what number of ships should be being chartered at. So a little bit of transparency would take, I think, an awful lot of guesswork out of this. And as a result, the evidence from all the other industries is that the more confident people are in price, the more willing they are to engage in a trade. So the volume of trade increases. So more work gets done by the same amount of assets, bringing a sort of generalized benefit across the piece. I think also as well, if there is better transparency and information symmetry, you're more likely to achieve lower cost as well. So this means there's a little bit of downward pressure on price, but what it means is that the goods that are transported by ship have a lower overhead for the transport. So in other words, everybody's cost of living goes down a little bit if there's nobody making sneaky super profits as you go through the supply chain. I think the other thing is that a bit more transparency would lead to a bit more security in that supply chain. So, we wouldn't end up with these big market distorting events like, say, Hanjin going bankrupt. And if you look back through things like the Harper-Peterson Index, you see that the freight rates leapt immediately when Hanjin no longer was trading back in, I think it's 2017. So it's things like better information mean that everybody can forecast and plan better, which is a reduction in risk, which manages prices to something more stable, which can be bad for individual ship owners who happen to be placed right at the individual time. And you, with your background, will know that there are killings to be made. But I think that the net effect on the industry as a whole is, bad, because that huge volatility in price and the huge volatility in cost to the users of shipping at the end of it is probably a net disbenefit to everybody, to the world. And the world is the ultimate customer of shipping and shipping services, because 90% of everything spends time on ships, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, you touched upon our background. So in the broking world, obviously, whether it's in sale and purchase or more likely chartering, perhaps for this type of discussion, it's that negotiation, that final fixture rate, those sort of publicly or publicizing those sort of figures up there. I know they're often obviously reported on later on once the fixture's done, but it's that little bit of having an edge and a bit of negotiation by keeping your cards close to your chest, I think is still very important. Does that tie into what you're referring to with regards to transparency? Maybe having like certain rates for certain trades that just like everyone knows, like typically this is the standard rate from A to B, that type of thing, or are you thinking more of different terms?
I think people have tried that in the past, and I'm not sure that it's gone anywhere particularly interesting. I think that what we're probably likely to end up with is something that's almost unforeseeable from where we are right now. So in the same way that if you wanted to know, say 30 years ago, if you wanted to know how much a particular item of furniture cost, you had to pay somebody to come in from Sotheby's or somebody, and they'll say, yeah, but you might get about £500 for it at auction or something like that. Now, if you want to know how much your table costs, you just go and you search on eBay, and you can see the entire purchase history of all kinds of similar tables, and maybe even the exact same one, and you can end up with a really, really, really good estimate of what the value of that table is at that exact moment in time. So maybe we're not going to see things more like I don't know, a kind of standard price book, a bit like World Scale or something that's shared generally and that is used as a baseline for negotiation. Maybe it will just be that somebody will be brave enough to put all the transactions in the public space, and then people will be able to get a much better idea of the going rate. Because at the moment, that sort of information around the going rate, whether it's in sale and purchase, whether it's in chartering, or whether it's just in the management of vessels, like costs for staff or all that kind of thing, none of that information is available in any significant way. In certain areas of operations in shipping, that information is becoming more available. So you've got things like the EU's MRV program and the data that's being collected by Thetis. Eventually, these data resources are going to come in the public space, and we'll have much better visibility of what I think is a significant cost, operating cost for shipping generally. But it's the price discovery part that I think is where the biggest advantage is to be held.
Who will be the one that drives that need for transparency? Will it be regulations from like the IMO or classification societies, that type of thing, or will it be the ship owners themselves, which I imagine it won't be? But where do you think it will be coming from?
You might find it is the ship owners, actually. I would imagine that the IMO would be pretty reluctant to get involved in the revenue generation side. And they're quite happy to impose costs through regulation. You've got to improve your carbon emissions or you can't use this kind of fuel. But I imagine that there will be a ship owner, maybe one of the sort of like more progressive, like Northern European companies like say Maersk or Hapag-Lloyd, or maybe even a bulk carrier like Wilson, who will put that information out in the public space because they know that a reduction in the risk around price might drive more business to them, and their revenues might grow through a growth in the volume of transactions, rather than looking at short-term super profit opportunities. It's happened everywhere else, would be my response to people who doubt. There's nothing. Shipping's an unusual industry, but it's not exceptional. The principles of supply and demand and information symmetry and all that still apply. So I can't see why it won't happen. The fact it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean that this isn't going to be the thing that happens in the next 5 or 10 years. And I think there is an appetite within shipping, even within sort of like profit-driven companies, to discover what's next for shipping. I mean, how many years have we been seeing articles about, startups are prophesizing Uber for shipping, or, the next big thing in shipping is going to be, something along these lines. I think it probably just needs one or two of the big guys to go, actually, do you know what? We've worked out that now this is in our interests to engage and to be more open and more transparent. Maybe it will come out of the ESG movement. It's difficult to tell, but it will happen, and it will probably happen in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Maersk and Hapag-Lloyd. I think it was those two very recently just announced a strategic alliance, and maybe that will link hopefully to perhaps a bit more transparency depending on the projects they're working on and things. That could be a good starting point.
I think you saw a bit of a desire for transparency when you had a lot of the blockchain-driven projects, where people were putting information out in the distributed ledger, so they could be more open. And I think the time for that was maybe not quite right. But I do think there is evidence that some of the bigger liners and carriers will go down that route, putting more information out there. If only as the demand for more information becomes more, the demand for more data from the users of shipping become more common. Quite a lot of our customers are now providing really quite detailed breakdowns of, carbon emitted in moving cargo from A to B. At the moment, that's largely being done in the form of static reports. And I can't see people being satisfied with, a PDF saying, we burnt 2,500 tons worth of CO2 getting your wood from port A to port B. Pretty soon it's going to be people wanting sort of like real-time or near real-time data streams showing how much carbon was emitted on each day at each stage in the supply chain. And that's never going to be met with static reports or sort of like post-voyage manual activity. It's going to be all data pinging around all the time.
Yeah, I guess having access to live sensors will be the best solution. I would have thought. Oh, obviously, way out my topic zone, but yeah, I guess that actual kind of live feeds. Obviously, you've got video, live cameras, like companies like Shipping Systems, Orca AI, those companies developing really interesting kind of live visuals to help with maintenance and reporting on equipment and things. So maybe that's something that I'm sure will advance in that area.
Yeah, and think where we were just sort of like 10 or 15 years ago in terms of connectivity onto ships. There wasn't really high bandwidth, low latency connectivity to vessels. So there was almost no point in generating a lot of IoT or sensor data on board a ship, because what are you going to do with it? You're going to put it onto like a USB stick and then post it to an analyst next time you get to port. But with the low Earth orbit satellite constellation, so Starlink, Elon Musk's things, is the best known of them. Ships are no longer this isolated thing where, if you're lucky, you can get a fax off once or twice a day, or maybe even send an email if the weather's good. These places are going to be continuously connected, and the signal strength is probably going to be better than it is from my house, judging by some of the grief we're having getting this recording going. But as soon as that happens, and already we're talking to our customers, and they're sort of saying, yeah, we'll have complete Starlink coverage in 3 years. But as soon as those vessels are fully connected to the broader world, then IoT becomes really, really viable. Even if it's only for sort of like tracking. But also you can offshore all of the data that's generated by the engines, the auxiliaries, incinerators. So your carbon reporting all of a sudden can become automated. You can start doing really quite insightful measurement of the environmental impact of the ship generally. And what we know from MRV and DCS is that the more insight we get into the performance of vessels, the more likelihood that a vessel will be scrapped and replaced, an inefficient vessel will be scrapped and replaced with something greener, which has the benefit of new ships coming into the fleet, which means the shipbuilders are happy, which means that the carbon cost of each shirt that comes in from the Far East, or each laptop, each unit of energy that's shipped in, reduces each time. And again, those are generalized societal benefits.
Okay, fantastic, good. So maybe just to summarize then. So in your mind, what do you think are the main opportunities for transparency in shipping? Is there anything in particular you can see happening in the next kind of 1 to 2 years to accelerate it at all? You mentioned closer partnerships, perhaps.
Yeah, I think Starlink. So better connectivity to vessels will be a general tool that will lead to all kinds of additional data coming out. And everybody works. There's no stupid people working shipping. They're all sharp folks. And what those guys do with the more generally available data, I think will surprise and delight lots of people. So the pressure for me as a product owner is, how can I give my customers tools to analyze that data without them having to sort of start from scratch or engage, like a bespoke engineering consultancy to come and make something very specific. So that's the first kind of challenge for me, but that will all be about helping people make sense of what they're currently doing without spending hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars doing so. So the demand for analytics, I think, is going to be pretty strong in the next couple of years. I think lagging that will be an end to planned maintenance. I think as soon as we get better data off vessels, people will start looking at managing their assets on a much more responsive basis to eliminate things like unplanned off hire and reducing stores and spares costs. So those are the first two things, and I think that those will happen pretty quickly and probably happen sort of like in lockstep as data and bandwidth increases on board vessels.
Great. Okay. Just a bit of a tangent question. So we talked about Starlink, and obviously there's OneWeb and a couple of real big key players in the more common marine VSAT space. Mm-hmm. Just while we're on the phone or on the call, what's your view of the prospects of the kind of marine Satcom space? Because we've seen so much, I guess, so many companies been driven down on price by the big players like Starlink. Yeah. What's your opinion of the other players out there and the market in general?
I'm pretty, it's my first job was telecoms. Yeah. And so I view all of this stuff as like a utility. So it's a commodity and there's going to be competition on price. So, I don't really lie awake at night worrying about how Inmarsat are going to do versus somebody else. They're big boys. They'll sort that market out themselves. I do think that things like Starlink are going to be a disruptor. And I think that, I've yet to meet a Tesla driver that says Elon Musk made their life worse in some way, shape or form. So I think there's going to be a disruption, but I think that the outcome of that disruption is probably going to be quite positive for everybody. And let's face it, the existing satellite vendors have had 10 years to get really high bandwidth, low latency services at a really cheap price onto vessels. And, the cost of that has been, in some ways it's held the industry back. It's definitely impacted on mariners' quality of life. The access to the outside world off a ship is something that's been really quite lagging for them. So it's an interesting question. That market's going to go through a period of disruption. As it comes out of that market, out of that period of disruption, unit costs will have gone down, initial costs will have gone down, quality will have gone up. And in many ways, if you want to understand what better transparency in commercial shipping as a whole looks like, maybe have a look at what happens to the connectivity market, because that's going to lead transparency, I think, in shipping generally. And if that goes well, i.e. everything gets better for the end user, then we've got reason to be optimistic about shipping as a whole. Is that a coherent answer? Because you came out of left field with that one, Callum.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I know, throw that one at you, but no, it's something I'm aware of, obviously, and we're kind of we have some specific maritime software and obviously maritime satellite communications type of clients, and I'm just thinking for them and their market and their projects they're working on. So that's really interesting, and that definitely makes sense for that to be kind of the driver of the data to start with. Actually getting it back to shore makes complete sense. So I think that's really helpful. Okay, awesome. Right. Well, thanks a lot for giving your views on those particular areas. I'm sure our audience will find it extremely helpful. For anyone listening that might be interested in a career, perhaps more in product management, can you give us a quick overview of kind of what the day-to-day life is? I know we touched on it earlier in the conversation, but for any aspiring product managers, what does the role entail, and what kind of tips might you have for anyone looking to go into that role?
Oh Christ, I'm probably the worst person in the world to ask this, because the product management didn't exist as a discipline when I went to school, and I've sort of ended up in it almost by accident. I think the thing is, I think if you really enjoy solving problems for people, and product management is really interesting, I think that you have to be relatively technical, but sometimes having a direct background as a developer is distracting, because you know how you would fix the problem. And actually, as I think we said at the top of this, the important thing really is much more talking to customers and working with them, and then distilling their correct answer for the problem that they're experiencing. That's like stage one. And then I think stage two is working out how to make that solution to a problem general for everybody, because it's not that hard to come up with the solution for a problem that Callum Beaumont Shipping Limited is having. It's very difficult, though, to come up with a solution to that problem that applies to all of the shipping companies out there, and doing it in such a way as it can be easily monetized. And really, if you're going to go into product management, that's kind of the nub of the problem that you're trying to solve. And if you're going into product management in shipping, those sales cycles are long, the implementations are long, and the return on the investment has to be big to justify it. So it's a tricky area to make a living. I personally would probably recommend a circuitous route into product management. But I have an enormously talented set of product managers who work for me, who have come into product management almost direct from shipping. So they're mariners themselves, and they seem to have made they make it look easy, man. It's really upsetting for me, who has to work hard at it. These younger guys just sort of come in and they just sort of smacked it all over the park from day one. So, but get used to talking to customers, regard it as a problem-solving exercise, but for God's sake, at the end of the day, it's also a commercial enterprise, and coming up with a brilliant solution to a problem that nobody really has, and the people who do have it won't pay you to fix it, is not the way to make a success of things. Gosh, maybe I do know what I'm talking about.
No, it makes sense. No. Awesome. No, really helpful. Thank you. Okay, well, yeah. Well, I think anything else you'd like to add before we kind of wrap things up?
I suppose if people who are thinking about becoming product managers want to kind of tip on the tech that's really worth looking at, I think that when it comes to understanding data better and reusing data and getting sort of more out of the whole activity, I think that the ChatGPT style LLM models, I think are interesting, and I think probably in 18 months you'll find versions of that technology that deal as well with numbers data as well as they currently do with text-based stuff. So if somebody is really thinking of an area to specialize in that will maybe set themselves apart when it comes to product management, have a look at what's going on in the various LLM worlds and get proficient in that, because I think that people who are natively competent in that will be doing some very interesting things in a couple of years' time.
Okay. Excellent. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time today. And before I let you go, obviously, always like to ask our guests a little bit more about themselves. So, is there any couple of things you can share us that perhaps people may not know about you? Any particular hobbies that you enjoy doing, or anything along those lines?
Hobbies assumes that I have spare time, and I've got two relatively young kids, so I think I'm a full-time dad more than anything else almost. But in the time away from the children, away from work, I make music. I've been a musician for 30 years now, and I work with other musicians, and that's a hugely rewarding thing. Very, very different to the day job, which I think is the purpose of hobbies. But also I live in the middle of nowhere, as you can tell from the internet connectivity. So I spend quite a lot of time outside in the country, in the south of the UK, which is great. When it's not -10 outside, because I'm freezing today, Callum. It's so cold here, I cannot tell you.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah.
Cool. No, awesome. What sort of music do you play? Is there any particular instrument at all?
Guitar, keys, and the recording studio. I mainly work producing other people's stuff nowadays, because I live in the middle of nowhere and there's nobody else here who plays musical instruments as far as I can discover. So it's a bit of a lonely forest player. But it is time away from work. It's time away from the kids, so that's good too.
Awesome, great. Well, yeah, we can talk about that maybe off the camera, but that's really interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that. And if anybody would like to reach out to you with any questions regarding obviously what we've spoken about today or about ShipNet, what's the best way for them to do so?
Always LinkedIn, always available on LinkedIn, or you can email me direct at john.wills@shipnet.no, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Great.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show today, I look forward to speaking again soon, and we'll tidy up the any little edits we need to make regard to the signal and things. But thank you again for joining.
Cool. Thanks ever so much, Cam. Good to see you.
Awesome.